Let's go ahead and break this down real quick. What is anatomy? Don't say the parts of the body. Not all at once. Okay. Anatomy is basically the structure, whereas physiology is going to be more based on the function. And it would make sense that as you study things, and since this is all based on evolution, as you look at this more and more, you'll see that there's an immense relatedness between the two. And it works out that the specific structure you're looking at that's the function. Awesome. It's a simple review real quick. Let's remind ourselves how biological organization goes. And rather than me write it down, I'll start you off with like maybe the first two, and I want you to take them and I want you to independently, real quick, I want you to finish this up. I want you to take this and basically run with it. First level is going to be atoms, which come together to form molecules. And then from this point onward, actually this is going to be your responsibility. So I'll give you like maybe a minute to fill in the rest of this table, basically. Fill it in, it's all good. Okay, I think we're probably done with this. I would suspect that we're done with this. Atoms form molecules. Molecules form what? Okay, good. What do organelles form? Okay. Then what do cells form? Okay. Guess we should go ahead and keep going. Tissues form. And then after that is... This is good. Thank you for the couple people that are answering. Let's keep going. What's after this? Okay, and then after that? Oh, good. What's a population? So that would include like me and Tinkerbell, right? We're a population, right? Oh, okay. Then that would mean that me and Tinkerbell are a community, right? So that would be like a mutualistic relationship. She wags her tail, that makes me smile. I feed her food, works out. What do communities form? Ecosystems. Good. Just like that, right? One person nodded their head. I assume that I'm right. We talked about this guy in our previous unit. This was all about ecology. That's in the past now. Today we'll talk about some of the tissues, and then from that point onward we'll work discussing these two, organs and organ systems. We'll see, of course, everything's very closely related, just like it was in ecology. This is basically chapters 40 through 49 that we'll be looking at. But we look at it from the perspective of a human, or creatures that are like a human. So this isn't like the anatomy physiology of a shark. It's human. Ecology, 40 through 49. We're going to be studying this based on like mammal anatomy physiology, more so than like a shark or something else. Good stuff. Any questions? Oh, okay. let's talk about just some basics. There's about 220 types of cells in the body, right? Different organs will typically be made of different tissues. And there's also a special type of fluid called interstitial fluid. Which is the fluid that's between the cells. When we talk about different tissues, we'll break tissues down into about 4 major categories. Of course, there were 2 tissues that were like a relic to animals. What were those 2 tissues? Nervous and what? And then we'll also see that the normal, or the very common connective tissue, very common in animals, as well as epithelial tissue, which we've seen for some time now. Again, these are your 4 main tissue categories. Cool. Any questions about how there's 4? Good. Okay. Before I get into the breakdown of each type, I do also want to go over just real quickly like the major systems, just to remind you. This should be extremely basic. Our job over the next probably about 3 weeks or so is to take each of these apart. But for now, let's just go and talk about the major organ systems. And their functions. Okay. So I'm gonna write down a bunch of these, and actually, what I want is I want 2 things made. I'm gonna give you an organ system, so we can make like this massive T chart. No, don't cry. It's all good. Don't be sad. And I want you to give me some of the anatomy and then some of the physiology. The way your book breaks this down is that they say that they want the major components or the major structures. So I'll write structure right there. And then physiology, of course, would be the function. Your book doesn't really use the term anatomy physiology. They use structure, function, or form and function. Whatever it is, I think anatomy physiology just sounds nicer, so I go with it. Good? Awesome. So I'm going to write down these systems, and what I want you to do is I want you to fill in the blanks. That's going to be your job for the next couple minutes. Digestive. You could even fill in a lot of these yourself. I'll fill them in for you, I guess. Circulatory. Respiratory. Immune. Excretory. Endocrine. Nervous. Integumentary. The skeletal system. The muscular system. So again, what I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to get you to spend some quality time with this list. In fact, why don't you work with maybe a buddy around you? Find a friend, phone a friend. Don't phone me, of course, because my cell phone's off. But get some information down, and let's knock this out. Let's say you have 4 minutes to fill out this chart, and that's plenty of time. Good luck. Work together. Those are really pretty lines too. Joseph. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and go through this real quick. And what I'll do is I'll leave the anatomy box open. I really want to get the physiology, the function down. This is something we can come back to. That's really not a major problem. As far as your different systems and their function, digestive is going to be to absorb nutrients. If you wrote down that this is going to be a breakdown of nutrients, you could also say that it's somewhat of a breakdown and absorption of nutrients. However, it's not like it is not an ATP production thing. That's mitochondrial and that's cellular. Circulation, pretty simple. Carry O2 and glucose to cells. And then carry CO2, water, and other wastes away from cells. Respiratory. New O2 in and CO2 out. Cool. Immune. Okay. So protection. And I would say like on a cellular level from like the nasties of the world. Excretory, don't say make urine. It is a filtration system. Filters waste. Urine is the accumulation of that filtration product, but the kidney is not making urine. It's not even making urea. Your cells are making urea. The excretory system just collects it. Make a good filter. The endocrine. Hormones, which means that this is going to be based on communication, or it's going to be a communication system. Nervous. Don't write scared. What? Very good. Communication. Now communication though at the nervous level is like quick. So I'm going to write down quick right through here. Because it's going to be based on the neuron, which is of course the cell of the nervous system. The endocrine system, it's going to be very, very long communication, like a long distance relationship. There's a time delay in there. And that's kind of the way the endocrine system goes. There's a time delay. Integumentary. Protection, it's your skin. Also, you could say that it's your hair, your fingernails as well. Skeletal, for movement, right? Support, structure. Protection. If you have a problem remembering that it's protection based, think of your rib cage and where it's oriented and why it would be oriented there. Muscular. All about movement. A better term than just movement would be locomotion. So what you see there is you see like what I would call your major functions. If you got this in your mind, then building down each chapter is going to be pretty simple. And the way your book works is it works to take each one of these guys and basically give it its own chapter. For instance, the immune system is, I believe, chapter 43. Endocrine is 45. Excretory is 44. Digestive is 41. Circulation and respiratory is 42. So it's like each one of these guys has their own little chapter. Works out really well. Awesome. Our job will be to take these step by step and break them down accordingly and discuss all the pieces. Is there anyone that has a question or a comment about where we're at or what we're doing right now? Okay, so we're all set to go. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on. Again, our deal today was really to talk about your major types of tissues as an intro phase. In fact, if you look at the board over there, chapter 40 is all about like an introduction to animal systems and a discussion of tissues. How many different types of tissues were we talking about? Yeah, because we're in animals, we're dealing with animal stuff. So we have 4 major tissue types. So 4 types of tissues. We'll talk first about epithelial tissue. And you'll see that this is really kind of a no card thing, is what this comes down to. This is just lots of no cards. Epithelial tissue. First off, let's talk about some of its major functions, or some of the major points to make. First off, of course, it would be found on the outside of the body and lining the organs. So, found on the outside of the body. And the lining of organs. Now, to make sure that we got that lining of organs, that's not an outside covering, that's literally on the inside of the organ. So if you ripped open your stomach right now, don't do that because that's 1, disgusting, and 2, dangerous. But in the event that you did that and you opened up your stomach, you have to feel the inside, okay, of the stomach. So think of your stomach as a balloon. This lining is not on the outside of that balloon, that's on the inside of the balloon. We have fun with that? That actually will become very important here shortly on understanding what lining, what that term means. These cells are very, very closely joined, so they're close together. Again, I think that would make sense if you think about the aspect of protection. And they have a variety of shapes, so they have different shapes, which would include cuboidal, columnar, and squamous. Cuboidal looks like basically like a dice, like a little block, so I'll say just a cube. Columnar looks more like a brick or a rectangular prism, I guess you would say. And squamous looks more like a floor tile. Really short. Cool. Probably would help if I spelled the word towel right.
Yeah,
My bad. Or it didn't look right, at least. I don't know if I had good intentions.
I don't know what that last letter was.
I think that was like a weird E. Looked like a Y almost. Question.
Way back when, back in the day, like 6th grade.
Like Wednesday?
No, 6th grade.
For me or for you? Because for you,
just period, like.
you look at tissues every day. First off, just a mirror would do that.
Okay. In our old science classes, when we first got tissues.
Okay, that was like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would we, if we were actually looking at tissues? Which one would we probably look at?
Honestly, it could have been any type. A lot of slides that are prepared are like hepatic tissue, so they're like tissue of the liver. You could look at skin. That's pretty simple, because that's not too much to have some skin tissue somewhere. There's more skin tissue in this room than you can imagine right now. Dude, I'm just being honest. Dude, probably those, cardiac tissue. I think I have a couple slides that is cardiac-based tissue. I have some muscular tissue back there. It's really simple to get your hands on anything from a biological company. Now, if you're looking at making it yourself, obviously that puts some constraints on it. Probably skin would be one of the few you could get, right? You very well can't get your hands on cardiac tissue, or you shouldn't be able to, at least. But y'all looked at those back in the 6th grade. That's really awesome. Okay, let's talk about not just the different shapes, but maybe the different arrangements. Now, I know that those seem like pretty much the same, but they're actually different. The shape, of course, is what one cell looks like, or one of these guys looks like, as opposed to like the different arrangements would be like how they are stratified, and I don't want to use that term actually. How they're whatever synonym for arranged is, how they are oriented. They could be simple, which means that you have one cell layer. They could be stratified, which is when you have many layers. Or they could be pseudo-stratified, which is when you have a variation in layers. And to help you out, to give you some assistance with this, let me show you a fantastic picture from your book. I can get my hands on this picture real quick. We all look very, very tired today. Are we okay? What happened? Did y'all have spring break? How was that? Did we have a good time? What'd y'all do? What's your function? You watch college basketball? I watched Wonder Pets. So, pretty cool. What is Wonder Pets?
Yeah, what is this Wonder Pets thing?
It's an amazing show on, I believe, Netflix.
Kid cartoon or like an adult cartoon?
No, it's children's based, I believe. I mean, I'm not a child, but I like it, so I guess you really can't go that far now, can you?
Basically, it's like a brownie, which means you like brownie now.
I'm sorry, what was that, Joseph Tusmer?
That's so you become a brownie.
I don't know what that means, dude.
God. Okay.
Let's go ahead and talk about types of connective tissues.
My house is awful for lands. The one thing my Switch only has 20 ports on it, so like once you have 20 people, there's no port to play.
Okay, well, let's talk about connective tissue, which are going to be like your binding and support tissue. The cells in this case are typically scattered. Throughout the ECM. Does anyone remember what ECM stands for? Okay, well, I got this one. It stands for extracellular matrix. The matrix is the area like in between the cells. It's not that movie about the fake world or whatever. This is real biology. Y'all saw that movie, I guess, The Matrix? Wow. Let's talk about the different types. The collagenous fibers. We'll talk about some of their functions in just a second. Elastic fibers and reticular fibers. As far as major functions, collagenous fibers are going to be about strength and flexibility. Elastic fibers are going to be rubber bandish. I don't know. They snap back into position. Reticular fibers are going to be more about connecting other tissues. So connection of tissue to tissue. Now, some of the subtypes of these, if you will, and I'm just going to write down, you know, I guess I could talk about, I could include these as like other major types. Cartilage. There's tendons and ligaments. Tendons, of course, do what? Attach muscle to bone. And ligaments are about bones to joints. Just to keep this list going of other types of tissues, there's adipose tissue, which is basically fat storage tissue. Another type of tissue is going to be blood, awkwardly enough. It's a type of connective tissue. And even bone is connective tissue. And so you're looking at what I would call like your major types of tissues. And we're going to talk about some of these in pretty fair detail. So let's actually talk about muscle tissue for starters. And before we get into that, I think we need to realize that there's about 3 types of movement that your body can do. The 3 types is going to be the controlled movement. So I think you know what controlled movement is. If you don't, just take your hand and hit your forehead like this. That's controlled movement because you're controlling that. Involuntary is going to be something you can control, right? That would be like when your stomach churns. That's a good example. And then there's the other type of movement, which is also involuntary, but it's a special type, so we mention it too, and that's cardiac. So how many types are there? 3. 3 types of movement. One is voluntary, where you hit someone. Don't do that. I'm just suggesting that that's what you could do. What's the second type? Involuntary, so like the stomach churning, or the knee-jerk reaction. And the last one is what? Cardiac tissue, right? Okay, so let's talk again. Let's write this down. Let's get in detail about muscle tissue. I want to make sure we're all writing this stuff down, all paying attention. I know some of us are zoning out. I can watch you zone out. Nope. Okay. So there's, I would say, skeletal muscle tissue. And I should call this muscle tissues, to be honest with you. So let me be a little more specific, call it muscle tissues. Skeletal muscle tissue is 1. There's also smooth muscle tissue. And the last one is cardiac muscle tissue. So there's 3 right there. Sometimes skeletal muscle is called striated muscle tissue. As far as their major functions, skeletal muscle is going to be for voluntary movement. Smooth muscle tissue is going to be for the involuntary movement. And the cardiac muscle tissue is going to be for cardiovascular function. That's my fancy way of saying heart pumping. And is your heartbeat, is that voluntary or involuntary? Because you can't control it. Okay, good. Yay. Let's talk, we were talking about 4 types of tissues. There was the connective style of tissue. Then we had muscle tissue. Then there was the 2 unique ones. So one is like nervous tissue. So let's talk about nervous tissue real quick. Just a very few couple of things that you need to know about nervous tissue. One is that the major type of cell is the neuron. You really do need to know its structure. So I'll go through that real quick. If you've taken AP psychology, you guys should have talked about this. Has anyone taken that class? Okay, 3 people. So I think we should have seen this before. I'll draw out just the simplest little picture real quick. Again, my drawings typically are horrible. Thank you. That's basically it. What is this long area right there? The axon? The axon hillock, the connection point between the axon and the cell body. You have all these little fibers or extensions. What are they called? Good. Dendrites. What did she say? Okay. So there's your major parts of a neuron. And we will talk about how there's an electrochemical gradient, which we've seen so many times before. That facilitates the transfer of information. And it does so very quickly. Remember that this type of tissue, just to kind of throw this in there real quick, because I really just want to make sure we got this before I jump into this chapter in about a week or two. This system is a very, very quick communication system, and this really opposes the endocrine system. I mean, it is a helpful agent, but the endocrine system is notoriously maybe a little bit slower of a system. So I don't want to take away its importance, because it's not that. If you think about nervous systems are very, very quick, but very momentary. The snap only goes on for as long as my neurons carry that signal. Whereas the endocrine system is, yes, like not as quick, but it certainly is longer lasting. For instance, your brain, in your pituitary gland, you release a bunch of hormones that make your system work. One of the hormones, I'll just throw this out to you real quick, is called TSH. Does anyone know what TSH stands for? Okay, I'll throw this one out to you. TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So hopefully you're paying 100% attention real quick, because I think some of us are, I'm watching you zone out actually right now. Thyroid stimulating hormone is produced in the pituitary gland, which is somewhere in the brainstem right back over here. And this TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, goes directly to the thyroid stimulating, which is about right here. Does anyone know what your thyroid does? Your thyroid itself makes a couple of hormones, T3, T4, and thyroxine. These 3 hormones that I've just mentioned that are made by your thyroid gland right here all need iodine. Remember the lady with the goiter? Oh, can't forget that picture. They all require iodine, and they all control metabolism. That's what they all do. Your thyroid basically is your metabolic system. Now, when your brain makes the TSH in your pituitary gland, and then that TSH goes down and affects your thyroid to make its own hormones, those hormones aren't like the snap that I just did with my fingers or my thumbs or whatever it is. The endocrine system is going to be not as quick. That's true. The snap is very quick. The TSH released and the T3, T4 thyroxine production is a little bit longer. But that system is certainly going to last a lot longer. So my body can make TSH, and then it can make the T3, T4, and thyroxine in adequate count. It can make it in pretty large count. Cool? So, yes, long-lasting, even though it is a long-distance communication. Long-distance communication based on hormones, which we can see are sometimes steroids, sometimes proteins. And how would you carry this information? You know you carry like electrochemical impulses from your brain through nervous tissue, like through the neuron. How would you carry a hormone? Bloodstream. bloodstream. Transports. Cool. Tomorrow we'll talk about feedback systems and finish chapter 40, and we'll move on to 41. I would say quizzes would be tons of fun tomorrow, so be prepared. Tell your friends.